Welcome to Heritage Church. I'm Michael. I'm one of the pastors here. If you don't mind, pull out this little card right now before we get started here. And that little info card on the end, it actually rips off. So tear that off for me if you don't mind. And everyone, if you don't mind, put your name, your email, any updated information. If you're a guest here today, please fill this out. This will be how we kind of contact each other and figure out what's going on. We'll send you the newsletter. If you ever want off of it, just click unsubscribe. We'll take you right off it. We won't misuse your information or stalk you or anything like that. So please take that card. At the end of the service, you can put that card in the offering bucket on the way out the door. We're glad you're here if you're our guest today. We're so happy you decided to come to church here with us, and we hope you enjoy it and get something out of this today. And we know you had a lot of places and a lot of things you could be doing today, so it says something about you that you're here this morning, and we love that. So we are in the beginning, or no, in the middle actually, of our Summer Blockbusters 2017 series. We do this every summer. We love this. We cover the spiritual themes of the summer's hottest movies, and we do that because it goes along with what Jesus said about having eyes to see and ears to hear, and as Pastor Suzanne would say, hearts to feel. And so if we look hard enough, we can see God in everything, especially creative things. You can find God in creative things because He is the creator. And so this is a great movie. I don't know if you saw this. This is kind of a reworking of Spider-Man. They had Spider-Man a decade or two ago, and then they had another one. And this is a reworking of it, and it kind of integrates Spider-Man into the whole Marvel universe that has Thor and Captain America and Iron Man and all those kind of characters in that, and it's pulling Spider-Man into that universe. And he's Spider-Man's kind of a misnomer because he's just a kid. He's a spider kid. He's 15 years old. He's a high school student, right? And so it's Peter Parker who is Spider-Man, like from the comic books. And so this is after his conversion into getting his wonderful powers and all that stuff, where the spider bites him and all that. He's actually just coming off, at the beginning of this movie, off a mission with the Avengers, and it was kind of like a tryout to be on the Avengers, and so he's pumped, he's excited, he's getting to use his powers, and this guy right here, Tony Stark, who's the Iron Man, who also does kind of high-tech weapons and stuff, has given him this awesome suit that has all these extra things it can do too. So he's really pumped because now he has kind of an internship with Tony Stark to be part of the Avengers. He's training to be an Avenger. And so he's really pumped. And this is a 15-year-old kid. What do kids dream about all the time, especially young men? We're always dreaming about being the hero, right? We tie little capes around our necks. We do all that kind of stuff. And so to have superpowers and do all this stuff is just, he's pumped and he is ready. The thing is that Tony tells him, slow your roll. I want you to stick in your neighborhood, calm down, pretty much relegates him to neighborhood watch, right? I mean, because he's a 15-year-old kid. He's got to finish school. He's got to do all this stuff, right? And he's just not ready yet. He lets him keep the suit. And the suit's got all these wonderful powers, but he says, take care of bike thefts and help old ladies across the street and rescue kittens out of trees. That's what I want you to do right now. And so he's frustrated. He's already fought with the Avengers once. He's got all these powers. He's got this amazing suit, and he's being sidelined. And so he spends every waking moment looking for some villain to wander across his path and trying to do his thing. And he finally finds one, Adrian Toomes, the Vulture. And he finds a real villain. And when he finds a real villain, then it's on, right? And so he gets one of his friends, Ned, the guy that sits with him at lunch, and they hack the suit. And what they find out in the suit, because it's this high-tech suit, because he knows he needs a little extra to go after this Vulture, right? And they hack the suit, and they find in the suit something called a training wheels protocol. So Stark is kind of like not only sidelined him, he's limited what he can do. It's kind of like, putting the parental controls on Netflix, he's frustrated. He's like, why does he always treat me like a kid? And he's bouncing on a bed while he's saying it, He's like, why does he always treat me like a kid? And there's tons of stuff this suit can do that he can't access. So his friend Ned helps him take off the training wheels, right? He never stopped to ask himself if there was a reason they were on there in the first place. And when he goes after this villain, it all goes to pot, right? Because he doesn't know how to use this suit. And it's, instead of helping him, it's getting in his way and it's tripping him up. And he doesn't know all the things it can do. And it's actually causing him to not be as effective as he could, and he has to kind of really lean into his own power to make things happen, and he's just wrecking things around him. In fact, he's putting hundreds of lives at danger because he wants to be this hero. He wants to jump out in front of his training and do this, but he doesn't have what it takes to operate at that level. He never stopped to think, maybe there's a reason he wanted me to take kittens out of trees for a while. Maybe, just maybe, there was a reason why he was holding me back a little bit. And it's not until he almost kills hundreds of people through his actions and his unwillingness to train that Stark finally swoops in, saves the day, and demands the suit back. In other words, he's firing him from his internship. He says, give me the suit. He says, I can't give you the suit. I can't give you the suit. What am I going to do without the suit? And this is where the quote of the whole movie comes out. Stark looks at him. He says, if you can't be Spider-Man without the suit, then you don't deserve to be Spider-Man. You don't deserve it. In other words, you can have all the superpowers you want. You can be smart because he's a smart kid. You can be courageous. You can be willing to jump out there. You can do all that stuff. But if you don't have the character to sustain those things, you're nothing. You are worthless. And in fact, you're worse than worthless. You're dangerous. You can have all the power in the world and not have any character, and you become less than worthless. And that's kind of the spiritual theme in this that just hits home over and over and over again through this entire movie. And so we pick up with the Bible and biblical characters, and there's another young man who's in an internship. He's a disciple of Jesus. He's in a 3-year internship, and he's a little bit like Peter in the movies. In fact, his name is Peter. He's impetuous. He's bold. He jumps out in front of his training all the time. He wants to be seen as the hero. He wants to be seen as this religious know-it-all, this leader of this band of disciples of Jesus. He wants to, because up until that point, he was just a kid casting nets for his dad off a boat, right? And so Peter wants all this, and he jumps out in front of Jesus all the time. And Jesus has to reel him in, and reel him in. Until one day, he's not just worthless. He becomes dangerous. The night Jesus was arrested, Peter takes out a sword and hacks a guy's ear off. And it's only because he had bad aim with the sword. They didn't hack his whole head off. And Jesus stops him and basically sidelines him. He says, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Put that thing down. And he heals the guy. And Peter is so frustrated that Jesus won't let him fight, won't let him go out, that he runs off to sulk. And he does the very thing he promised Jesus he wouldn't do. He denied him. People call him out, aren't you with Jesus? And he goes, no. And Jesus had prophesied that before the rooster crows 3 times, and maybe you've heard this story, Peter would deny him 3 times. And he did. And so it isn't until after the resurrection, after Jesus goes to the cross, goes to the tomb, and rises up 3 days later, that Peter is actually finally restored. And it's not a pretty restoration. It really isn't. Have you ever got your butt chewed? Can you imagine getting your butt chewed by Jesus? I mean, he sits him down. He has a meal with him. And you know Peter's just sweating bullets, right? Because he thinks he's been fired. He thinks he's getting fired, right? He thinks his internship is over. And that's one internship you don't want to lose. And Jesus starts grilling him. He said, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's like, yeah, you know I love you. You know I love you. I wouldn't have followed you for 3 years if I didn't love you. Of course I love you. He said, then feed my lambs, Peter. Do what I asked you to do in the first place. And he goes, Peter, do you really love me? And Peter goes, you know I loved you. He said, then take care of my sheep, Peter. That's what I asked you to do in the first place. And then he uses a slightly different word for love in the Greek. It's still love, but it's a different kind. And it comes out like this, Peter, do you even like me? And he asks him 3 times, and it hits Peter that he's denied Jesus 3 times. And Jesus asks 3 times. And the last one is kind of an insult. And it breaks him. He says, you know everything. You know I love you. And then Jesus, while he's got Peter in that vulnerable moment, while he's broken there, he points out what really went wrong. He says, very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted, but when you're old, you'll stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. And John, who wrote this after Peter died, said Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death which Peter would glorify God. Then Jesus said to him, follow me. See, Peter, this isn't about you being a hero. Me calling you, this internship isn't about you being a hero. It's not about you being a leader. It's not about you getting the glory. It's not about you working miracles, which you will do, but it isn't about that. See, I know you say you love me, Peter, but what happens if I call you and it's not when you want to go or where you want to go? What happens? I know you say you love me, but what if I send you to people that you don't necessarily like and tell you to love them and tell them about me? Will you go? I know you say you love me, Peter, but what if one day, just one day, I call you to the cross like I went to the cross? See, the question, Peter, isn't do you love me? The question is, will you love me then? Will you love me then when it all hits the fan? Will you love me then when it comes down to the rubber hitting the road? Will you love me then? Because you can have all the power. I can teach you to do miracles. I can teach you to have faith. You can be courageous. You can be strong. You can be smart. But if you don't have the character to sustain it, it's worthless. It is worthless. Because when I say go, I want you to go. When I say do, I want you to do. And unless you start to trust me in that and quit working out of your own power, this isn't going to work. It's not going to work. Will you love me then? Because you don't have the character to sustain this. You're useless. Even dangerous. And that's been proven over and over again by disciples of Jesus who don't have the character and yet use their power. And so Peter never forgot that. He never forgot that. In fact, he spent his entire life doing the first thing, because Jesus took him right back to lesson number 1, right at the end of that verse, and he said, follow me. It's the first command he gave to him. It's the only command you need to know. Follow me, Peter. Follow me. Get that right. And he spent the rest of his life following Jesus, and he did amazing things. He's known as the first pope of the church. He was the leader of the early church, Peter was, because he followed Christ, not because he jumped out in front and did whatever he wanted to do. He followed Christ. He went back to lesson number 1, and he spent the rest of his life teaching other people how to do that also. And in fact, he wrote a couple letters. He probably wrote more than these, but these are the ones we have in the Bible, 1st and 2nd Peter. And in 2nd Peter, his main theme for that entire letter is what it takes to follow Jesus, and that's what we're going to look at today. What Peter wanted us to know. So this is what he says. He says his divine power, God's, Jesus, has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. You notice, none of this really comes from us. Not a bit of it. It all comes from Jesus. You know, if you make your faith about self-exploration, self-discovery, self-righteousness, whatever self, this might as well just be a self-help group. This isn't about that. This isn't about you. This is about accessing his power, his glory. That's way, way bigger than what we can ever do. And this word knowledge is so key, because it's not knowledge like we think knowledge. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's not facts. It's a whole different word in the Greek. It's epignosis. And it means it's got the flavor of revelation. It's God pulling back the curtains of heaven and letting you peek inside. And so our job is to dive into knowing Christ, because when we dive into knowing Christ, then we can follow him, then we can access his power, then his glory is out. That's our job, is to dive into that revelation of Christ in our lives. And he said through these, he's given us very great and precious promises, so that through them, listen, you may participate not in human nature, in divine nature. If this is a self-help group and we're just participating in human nature, then that's what we're escaping from. That's the corruption. That's the thing that's wrong with this world. We're here to participate in the divine nature. If we're not here, if we're not pointing you to participating in the divine nature, what we're doing is useless. You can go get that on a self-help book. This is about accessing the divine nature. And what Peter's really, really asking you, if you want to follow Jesus, the first question you got to answer is, do you want to be on the team? Do you really want to be on the team? Because if you don't, it's like Peter Parker in the movie. He wanted to be on the team, but he didn't really. He just wanted to be a hero all by himself out in the open. He didn't want to participate with the rest of the superheroes. Do you want to continue to participate just in human nature, or do you want to participate in the divine nature? Do you want to be on God's team? Because that's what he's asking us. And until you're willing to answer this question and mean it, there's no sense in it. Because you can have all the power, all the strength, you can do self-help till you choke on it. And if you don't have the divine in the middle of it, if you don't get that character to sustain it, it's worthless. So Peter goes on. He says, you really want to be on the team, right? If you answer that one, then this is what you need. He said, for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, to goodness knowledge, to knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, to perseverance to godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. He's saying you have to enter into character training. In fact, that's the question here. Do you want to train? Are you willing to train? Will you train? Look at that list, though. The list is amazing. You first of all, you just have to trust Jesus, period. You have to have faith. But to that, when's the last time we did a morals check on ourselves? There's the morals we say we have. We don't lie, we don't cheat, we don't steal, we don't commit adultery, we don't do all these things, right? But what's your real morals? How does your actions actually play out? And what's the real morals at work there? When's the last time you did a morals check on yourself? The only formal moral training I ever received in my entire life was in the military when I was 19 years old. My mom tried, right? But she's a single mom. She's doing the best. I never had formal morals and ethical training till I got in the military, and that's great. I'm thankful for what I received there, but it was about the military. It wasn't about real life. It was helpful in real life, but it wasn't about real life. I didn't hear the word integrity till I got in the military. What are we doing with our kids? Our kids ought to be in church where the only place left where they're getting formal ethical training and moral training. Our youth ought to be here every Wednesday. If you got a youth, I don't care if they don't want to come, make them come. This is a place where they're receiving formal moral and ethical training so they can participate in the divine nature. It isn't about them being good boys and girls so God loves them. God already loves them. This is about them participating in the divine nature. And the goodness, knowledge, and this is just gnosis. This is just getting smart about the world, getting smart about yourself. We have more access than any generation before us, and yet we are so dumb sometimes about Jesus stuff. We're more interested in knowing who's head of household on Big Brother than we are about Jesus and who Jesus was, right? That's it, or who the next bachelorette is, right? We're more interested in that stuff. We'll look that up, we'll Google it in a heartbeat, right? When's the last time you Googled Christ? And self-control? Have you checked yourself lately? Where do you need to hold back on in your life? Is it anger? Lust? Busyness? Things that are pulling you away from God? Me, it's probably the food, but it's a lot of other stuff too. And self-control, perseverance. This is being able to stick with it no matter temptation, sin, hurt, pain. Do you have perseverance? Or do you run away at the first sign of trouble? Can you stick with, you know what they call that nowadays? Grit. How gritty are you? And to perseverance, godliness. Do you worship God above all other things? Are you willing to say yes whenever He calls you? And the godliness, mutual affection, because God says, you don't get to just worship me and that's the end of it. You have to love my children. And finally, out of that, love. Look at the progression the progression of character traits here. And it is a progression. It doesn't mean you don't go back and forth, but it's a progression. It's the same stuff we teach our kids, right? You know, experts say if you don't connect, if you don't teach your kids to have faith in you in the first couple of months, they will struggle to connect with other human beings the rest of their lives. We teach our kids from the very beginning to have faith in us, right? And then we teach them just to do good things. Don't do that. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't do that. And then we send them to school, right? And then we teach them self-control. God, I hope we teach them self-control. And then we teach them to stick with it when it gets rough, right? And then we teach them about God. Hopefully we teach them about God, that there's a higher power at work here. And to that we have to love each other. And hopefully we teach our kids to be loving human beings. Could it just be that the character training that God wants us to go through is the same character training that we put our own children through? Could it just possibly be that God is asking us to grow up? To grow up in order to participate in the divine nature. See, you can have all the strength and power in the world and all the smarts and all that stuff. If you don't have the character, it's worthless. Just worthless. He says, if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge, in your epignosis of Jesus Christ, of participating. You'll be effective and productive in your participation in the divine if you add these quality traits in and you work on them time and time again. You know, so many of us, we get to a certain point in education, we're like, we're done. I read the Bible once, I'm good, right? You know, I mean, that's real. And if you even read the Bible, you know, we get to a certain point, we just quit. You know what? You're being called to be a lifelong learner of Christ. You know, and so, you know, there's a whole new religious designation, you know, when they do polls. They used to be like, you know, are you Protestant, are you Catholic, are you Buddhist, are you Hindu, are you none, right? You know, none of the above. I was none of the above for 31 years, right? I'm none. You know, there's a whole new one, done. They quit. They left the one institution that is put on this earth to train them to participate in the divine, and that's the church. Granted, it's been unproductive. It's been ineffective. But what did you expect out of a training institution? We're full of people in training, right? Could it just possibly be that the people in training are there to help reflect you to you a little bit so maybe you could work on you? You know, iron sharpens iron, that whole thing? Could it just possibly be that the difficult folks around you are working on your character? Why? We got to quit blaming the church's faults on people who are in training, especially when we haven't arrived ourselves. This is the one institution that's here to teach you to participate in the divine through Christ. And so what Peter's asking really is, are you all in? Are you ready to be done? Are you walking away in your heart before your feet actually make the trip? Are you really all in? If you're going to follow Jesus, you got to be all in. Because you can be smart, you can be gifted, you can be all these things. And if you don't have the character to sustain it, you are ineffective and unproductive in it. And, you know, there's nothing worse than being ineffective and unproductive. It's a game killer. Seriously. You get no confidence out of that. Well, what are you doing about it? Are you working on your character? Peter kind of stops preaching at him at the end of it, and he finally just says this to him. He says, I'll always remind you of these things. Even though you know them and are firmly established in the truth you now have, I think it's right to refresh your memory as long as I live in this tent of a body. Because I know that soon I will put it aside as our Lord Jesus Christ had made clear to me. He's referring back to that time when Jesus said, somebody's going to stretch your arms out and take you where you don't want to go. You're going to get crucified one day too, Peter. Are you all in? And you know that's exactly what happened to Peter. The Emperor Nero crucified him. You know what they say in the history books? They say Peter went to that cross and he considered himself unworthy to die the same way Jesus did. And he asked to be crucified upside down. That's how in Peter was. But he is committed. Before he died, he was committed to reminding these people what it takes to do what he's already doing, following Jesus. And he wants, above all things, for them to carry that forward. And he's asking them, will you pass it on? Will you do what I'm doing to you? Will you pass your faith on to another human being? Will you teach another individual how to participate in the divine? Will you do it, or does it die with me? Will you have the character to take what you're learning and transmit it to another human being? Will you teach them to follow Jesus? And you know what? Somebody did, because 2,000 years later, we're sitting here. Somebody did this. Somebody had the courage. Somebody had the character to pass on their faith to other human beings. Somebody did it for you. The question is, will it die with us? Will we pass on our faith? Will we have the character necessary to do it? Because we can be amazing. We can know everything about Jesus. We can be very smart, very gifted, and all those things. And if we lack the character to pass on our faith, what are we? Does it die with us? You know, this last year we've kind of rebranded the church, and we're doing a bunch of new things. It became Heritage Church, and we really worked on what it meant to be a church here. What is our real mission here? What's the core of what we're supposed to do? And what we landed on is that we exist here to make disciples who make disciples. That's our mission. That's the mission Peter had. That's the mission we've got all these years later. That's the mission. And we said there's a strategy to do it. You got to know, grow, go, and pass it on. You'll see it on our posters out there. You'll see it everywhere. And we put it everywhere on purpose. Because the first thing we ask is do you know Jesus? Not know in the sense that I know who he is or who he claimed to be or anything, but know, are you willing to dive into that? Will you place your faith in knowing Jesus? Will you participate in the divine? Do you want to be on that team? Are you willing to train for it? Are you willing to grow? Will you stick with it so that when God finally calls you to something even more difficult, a bigger mission, are you going to go? And will your faith die with you? Or will you pass it on? You know, we got a choice. Sincerely, we can make this about self-discovery and self-help and self-empowerment. We can do all those things at a church. And you know, in some senses, that is kind of what we're doing. We're just going about it backwards. We're not doing it through human knowledge and human power. All that stuff's going to come. And you'll live a better life, and you'll be a better person. We can do it all based on human nature. We can work on that, but you can get that anywhere. We're here to teach you to participate in the divine nature. Jesus said, put the kingdom of God first. All those other things will be given to you. Don't worry about those things. Follow me. And everything else will be given to you. So, do you want to be on that team? That's the question. Tom, can you get the band to come up? Every week, we try to give you next steps to go with the message, and they're on the back of your information card. It's on the response section of it, actually. And the first next step is this. It says, I will memorize 2 Peter 1, 5 through 7. That's add your faith to goodness and goodness to self-control. And I can't even remember the whole thing because I haven't memorized it yet myself. I need to check this. Are you willing to train? Because you can have all the intelligence in the world, all the knowledge in the world, all the courage in the world, but if we don't have that character, we're worthless. We'll never be able to participate in the divine. And that's what we're here for. And then utilizing that, I will create a personal training protocol. You remember the training wheels protocol? For the remainder of 2017. We are smart people here. We know how to plan. We know how to do things. We're not dumb. Most of you are college educated. You know how to create a plan for yourself. Don't blame it on the church. Well, the church isn't doing this for me. The church isn't doing that for me. What are you doing? Step up. Start doing this. Own your faith, because when you begin to own your faith, you start to participate in the divine nature. If you let everybody else do it for you, it's never going to happen. That's not character at all. That's just laziness. So are you going to do that? Are you going to plan out how I'm going to grow in those qualities that help me participate in the divine? Am I going to train? And the last thing is I want to place my faith in Jesus. If you trust him, the first command he's going to give you is follow me. Also, the last command he will give you, follow me. Are you willing to place your faith in that? If you've never said that before in your life and you want to mark that on the card, please do so. We won't embarrass you or anything like that, but we will call you and talk to you about what that really means in your life. And if you'd like to be baptized, that's kind of our entry point into the faith. That's our adoption into the family of God. And if you've never been baptized before, we'd love to share that with you. So mark your cards. At the end of this service, Pastor Suzanne is going to stand up and talk to you and tell you what to do with them. But I just leave you with this. We can be the most brilliant, courageous, wonderful people in the world. But if we don't have the character, what does it really mean?